that much water is coming in and coming out of that area down there. So if we were able to, once we put this 1,000,000-gallon tank there, we'll be able to store a lot more of that water from Rice Creek and Coldwater and North Ogden, so that we're not hitting capacities. Because in the summer, spring and summer, we're coming down in some of those areas. And then because that tank was so small, we would get to it, and it would cause us to have all the water we could get, at midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we were sending some of our drinking water down the creeks and those kind of things, where we'll be able to capture a lot more of that water now here at 1050, which is, that's very important to us. So as far as infrastructure, it's going great. The $3 fee has made a humongous impact on our roads. I mean, as far as our roads go, I mean, we're getting things done that we never could have in a long time, but we still got a long way to go with the streets. I mean, streets were, I think, our worst infrastructure, and then that $3 fee has really helped, but we've done a really good job with our main roads. I think that was our biggest focus when we got this $3 fee is, hey, we want people to know that their $3 fee, every month was going towards these roads. And so we made it a huge push to say, hey, we're going to do all of our main roads. But we've completed Alberta. We'll go over the line. We went Lomview, Alberta, 450, 3100, both sides, 1050, 3300, 3550, 2100, 1700. So I mean, that $3 fee is taking care of a lot of these major roads and big projects that we probably never could have ever got caught up on. And now we need to start getting into these neighborhoods. There's some neighborhoods that are, in some real need of road work that we'll be able to get into here in the next, 4 or 5 years. So
as you've been doing the roads, you've had some wear and tear on them. How do you like the chip seal?
I do like it. I absolutely love the chip seal. So we went to a ceramic chip about 6 years ago. So it's not an actual rock. It's ceramic. It's actually made, and what it does is that for all the new council, it actually has pores in it. These rocks it's a porous rock, and it sucks up all that oil, which makes it, one, stay on the road, because when you used to have the rocks, the oil would just kind of hold it in place, but it wasn't actually, getting in there. And so what was happening is you were getting a lot of those rocks to shed, especially the first snowstorms. We would plow these, and rocks would be lining the gutters, and they were it was terrible on the cars. It was terrible, we were only keeping about 50% of the rocks down on the ground. Since we went to the ceramic chip, those things, the pores, take all that oil in, and so we're holding, 70-80% of those rocks. The other thing nice about it being ceramic is when our plows actually do hit it, is because they're a ceramic chip, that they're not hitting the rocks and pulling them out of the ground and causing more damage. They actually shear that ceramic, and so that's why you get to see that kind of the smoother surface on our chip seals. And then we've included with that a leveling course underneath. So we put a small thin layer of asphalt, and then we put the chips on top of it. That has, it's been huge. I mean, Alberta 1050 and 3100 were the first ones that we did those ones on. And I mean, Alberta has held up so great. I mean, as many big trucks and those kind of things that we see on Alberta, that road looks really, really good. So it was a good choice trying it on those areas, and that's the way we'll go forward. We'll put this leveling course down before we ever put the chips down, and then we'll coat it after that, to give it that blacktop look, but also just it fills in all those, the little cracks and those kind of things. So
they claim that the salesmen claim that it adds at least 5 years, and I would say it does.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's been really, really good. So The other thing good about those ceramic chips is you don't get the cracking of windshields and those kind of things. I mean, because they're so lightweight that, I mean, you can literally, in fact, his sales pitches, he literally takes you out and he holds them in his hand. He throws them at his windshield as hard as he can because they're porous like that and they're so lightweight that it doesn't cause, you know, some of the damages to vehicles. So, no, it's been great. I mean, our infrastructure is, in the last 5 years, we've went leaps and bounds as far as that kind of stuff goes.
Dave, on that tank up there, 2,700, 1050, so we'll have 1.5 million gallon storage there?
Yep.
Okay, so it's 1 million in addition to what we have?
Yep. And the nice thing is, the way it's being designed is that we can actually take one offline or off, you know, with some automatic valves, we'll be able to take offline if we ever needed to. So, you know, we can take one of the tanks off, we can go send divers in, get it cleaned, those kind of things, you know, and then turn the other one on and they can go in the other tank and get it cleaned. And
so we'll have the 1 million up at Rice Creek, right?
So we have 2 million at Rice Creek.
2 million at Rice Creek, and then we'll have 1.5 million just downstream from it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
No fluoride and no lead?
No fluoride.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
No
People ask me the question is, we hear the numbers that by 2050 we may be up to 40,000 residents in this area. Is the water resources that we now have or potentially to have cover all of that?
So yeah, yes. Between the springs, the wells that we have right now, we're close, but we shored up water rights last year. Was it last year? We shored up five different places to drill wells. So those are actually guaranteed to us by the state of Utah, and we have the water rights to drill there. So, you know, at any given point, and the biggest thing was about that was that we got them down here on the flats. I mean, you guys all know that, you know, we had the failed tank, you know, there at, 2,800 and 450. We had that one where we drilled it and there was nothing there. And then at the very top of 1050, we've drilled a well there. We can put it in production tomorrow. I mean, we'd have to build the building, but as far as the water being there, we can pull out of it tomorrow. I mean, we can put a pump in it and drill or pull it out of it right now. So we have that water secured up there. All of our springs are doing great. I mean, and this winter will really help that. You know, after last winter, we got down pretty low in some numbers. The biggest advantage for us as a city is that we don't let anybody use culinary water for sprinkler systems. And with that, we have a good idea of what kind of water we're going to put out every single day. We know what range of water we're going to put out because, you know, winter, summer, that water's being used for in-house use instead of, you know, some of the other cities around us where they let, you know, their culinary water be used for sprinklers. It's really hard to gauge how many people are going to turn their sprinklers on all night and use those kind of water, and trying to figure out how we're going to gather all this water in the summer and not need it so much in the winter. That's our advantage, that we know we're pretty consistent about how much water usage we use every month. So, but yes, we have the water rights, and we have 5 sources that are down here on the flats that we believe could produce quite a bit of water from any of those 5 sources. So
That's good to know.
we did talk about the old public works. I mean, is there any direction that the council wants to go in that building over there?
We've always talked about selling it. I mean, that's just what we've always talked about. And then we have that family, is that right? Family Promises in there?
Family Promises in the old fire station, portion of it.
Yeah.
The chief is using a section of the old Public Works building. A few of the bays they've used for evidence and those kind of things. And
Does
then
search and rescue have?
the search and rescue they're also in the old fire station part of it, where the sewer used to be, so, yep. And then the bays up top, they're all being, I mean, to be honest with you, every one of them's being used as far as storage. My suggestion would be to think about keeping that portion at least. Keeping the bays up there, and then we have all the open bays too. You know, in the winter we take a lot of the parks equipment over there, and we store them underneath the covered areas. The old Public Works building itself is in bad shape. We've got a leak in the roof now. So if it was my suggestion to you, I would say let's keep that other portion just because I think we need the storage. I couldn't imagine, I don't know what we'd do if we gave up those bays right now. I don't know where we'd put all those things. I mean, we have the floats up there, we have some of our big plow trucks are up there, other storage as far as, you know, park stuff.
We don't have room over at Public Works.
No, I mean, obviously we could we'd have to make it work if we had to, but my suggestion would be, and to be honest with you, I mean, I would say, even looking at refacing all that, like, if we're gonna knock down the old building, and let's clean up the bays, like, reface all of them, and maybe close in all the rest of those other ones. I mean, we've got 5 more bays there that we could close in, and we could give those to the police for evidence, the parks for equipment, you know, put garage, you know, actual doors on those, close those in, you know, reface the whole thing and make it actually look nice. And then we can knock down the old Public Works building and sell all that portion. The other thing about selling the whole thing is that we have to, because of the well being there, well 3's be there, you can't be within 100 feet of that anyway. Well, there can't be any sewer within 100 feet of that anyways. So, I mean, if we sold the upper part where the storage is, they would have to figure out a way to get their sewer to discharge way on the other side of the property anyways.
That well's up at the top of the property, right?
It's kind of on the west side, like the northwest side of that property. And so it takes a big portion of that anyways, because there's a 100-foot radius where there just can't be any kind of sewers or those kind of things next to the well. And so it's just almost another reason just to keep the storage, because I think we would regret it, losing all that storage in the long run. Like, why did we give up something like that?
What, 3.5, 3 3/4 acres up there?
I don't know what the whole thing is.
2.9, hasn't it?
I really don't know what the whole
Yeah,
thing is.
it's in that range, 3 to 4 acres.
I think the last time we spoke about it, somebody I made the comment that, you know, why sell a piece of property that's an asset to the city? When it's there, it could be used for something important in the future. And as I recall, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said something about, yeah, we've sold property and then regretted that we had sold it
Yeah.
and bought it back. So, I think until,
That's the right of way going up 450.
is that right?
Yeah, it
I
was
just
a
think that-
120-foot right-of-way till we gave half of it away.
I just think if we've got it and it's an asset to the
Years
city,
ago.
I don't think we sell it. That's my opinion.
So, and I really do think we can make it look nice. I think, I mean, you reface it, and we've talked, I mean, I don't think the cost would be completely outrageous to get that refaced. And then, I mean, the garage doors would be the most expensive thing as far as putting on all the open bays and getting those closed in and actually giving, you know, other departments real storage that we all need. I mean, everybody needs more storage.
Could we get some
Not just
cost
Public
ideas on that, and tear down the old Public Works building?
No, I know I'm coming in late and I apologize for being a little bit late, but we own do we own the little empty lot that's east of the police department?
We own, yeah, so we own where the community garden is, and then we own about 80 feet, an 80-foot strip between the police station and the road.
And I know I'm going back, but now that I'm kind of catching up under where we were at, I think it's only wise to keep everything on this complex.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
So,
Well, Dave, hats off to your group for forward thinking and the things that have been accomplished as far as public works is concerned. So that when I turn my tap on, I got water, and when I flush my toilet, it flushes, and it's amazing things being done with the relining the sewers.
Yes.
Add another 50 years life or better to,
Yeah, the new lining, they gave us, it's 100-year life.
100 years.
So, yeah, it's, I mean, it's
Oh,
just as
we're
good
beyond
as, exactly. Just as good or not better than the pipe that they put in the ground in the first place, so. And then I just gotta, I mean, you gotta give credit to Jason, the way that, you know, because, you know, I talked about the leaks and the number, or the reason that we're way down. And Jason and his guys, what they've done with all those PRVs and completely regutting all those and going to stainless steel and poly tubing and those kind of things, like, all the credit's due to those guys, because, you know, with putting that kind of stuff in there, we're not seeing the leaks because we have such good control of all the water coming down the hill, and so it's all in that.
So Mayor, another thing that was brought up in responses from citizens in the survey was the idea of where houses should go. Is there a reason to do some conservation areas, things like that? That also came up in the general plan discussion a couple of years back, and you know, it might be worth the council talking about do we want to explore that more? And the reason if we don't do something now, it'll be too late. And I'm not saying you should do something now, but we should make a conscious decision. We're either trying to do conservation areas or we're just gonna let houses go in, because right now the land values and what the developers are making it's making a lot of people rethink their, you know, farmland. So.
John, remind me, you and I had a conversation about 6 months ago or so about, I'm gonna call it preemptive zoning, but it was tied in, I can't remember what you called it. But it's where as a council we can sit down and look at open pieces of land and give a loose designation of the kind of zoning that would go there, so that developers looking at purchasing that land would have an idea of what we had envisioned there.
So it kind of piggybacks on the idea of what's called vesting in your general plan. So what you do is you look at the zoning maps that are in your general plan, and you say, as part of the general plan process, the city council and the community is making a decision on what zoning will be applied to this piece of property when it develops in the future. And then developers can't come and ask for a zone change. Essentially, that what's in the general plan is what they're entitled to, or what they can get. The caveat to that is it's what they get, meaning that they can come in and say, oh, you said this will be zoned for 5 units to the acre. I'm now submitting my application for that, and the city has to say yes, but they can't ask for 6. So it's a double-edged sword. It helps if we go through the pain to essentially pull open that general plan again, look at the zoning designations that were made, and make sure that we're comfortable with those, because we don't want to vest the general plan without reevaluating that and making sure that we're not overcommitting on something or undercommitting. You know, have a very public process, do the general plan steering committees and things like that. But it would eliminate developers coming and asking for zone changes, because essentially the planning commission could say, yes, your subdivision density meets the zoning designation in the general plan, so you can go ahead and start your project.
Doesn't that tie in with what you and I talked about as well? if we want to preserve agricultural land, like up in your particular area, then we buy the development rights and.
Yeah, so there's a vehicle called a transferable development right, or a TDR. And the idea is that if someone wants to put so many units on an acre in a certain part of the city, they have to buy the density or the conservation rights from another parcel on the other side of the city or in another area. And the way that typically works best is when the municipality is the one who buys those development rights and then sells them to the developers. I think Utah law says you can't upsell them, but you basically have them pay you back what you spent on it, but it would require the city to get involved with some of those agricultural property owners and get those development rights tied up to create kind of an agricultural protection area. The best example of this is Park City does it. So they have lots of developable acres around the city, but they've transferred them off one spot, bought them, and then sold them to another developer in an area that isn't as big of an issue. The most recent thing they did is I think they spent about $65 million buying the development rights on the hillside right above Old Main Street. So there was a large ski project planned for that whole hill right behind, just to the south of all those homes in Main Street, and the city bought it out and just said, no, we don't want that for our community. So they ponied up the money, and so that's the type of thing. You could either have a developer. Some cities have tried to say developers will do it, but what they typically find is it's the interplay between the developer and the conservation landowner breaks down a lot, and so it hasn't been as effective as they would have wished it would have been, which is why it usually works better for the city to buy it.
Where would we have places where we could do that?
So that if you just think of the alfalfa fields along Fruitlander Mountain Road, those are the type of places. What they typically try and do is get critical mass, as well as something that people relate to. And I think in the general plan that the Fruitland corridor was one of those that was identified as an area where people would like to see the fields remain.
Alfalfa fields to the east of Barker Park, where they launched the fireworks right now. It's a big area back in there.
It's Lyman's ground.
Mm-hmm. And there's an area just across the hollow, just to the north of it, that's right out of 2600.
That is,
That's brown.
It's all alfalfa.
and it's being annexed into the city for development right now.
Developed.
So,
Is that brown?
Yeah.
but so that's the idea why if the council and the city and the community feel like this is something that's important, we probably need to do something, or else we'll miss our chance.
You have a couple of big bonds though, isn't it? How do you buy that kind of ground?
So if the council wants to do it, then a lot of times the families who are farming that ground like the idea of it continuing onward, and so usually the city can work out a favorable payment plan as opposed to paying cash outright. But essentially committing, we'll buy the rights at this much. They also typically, those families get a tax break depending on how the deal's structured. And then it also, for those agricultural easements, it's usually better for the easement to be given to the state, because the state has an agricultural easement office that owns a lot of agricultural easements across the state, and in particular up in Cache Valley, there's quite a few, like thousands of acres they own easements on. So,
Does it have to be agricultural land?
it can be any type of conservation easement, but typically agriculture is what's focused on, or open space. But in our situation in the city, the open space is most of the hillside is the open space before you get to the Forest Service. So there's that type of thing, and if you're looking at this type of program, you have to look at the areas where you're okay putting density so that you can save the development in the other areas. And that's the hard part, why you kind of have to reopen the city general plan again and really evaluate where are we okay putting some density so that we can save something else.
So a developer essentially comes to us and says, we're gonna sell them higher density in an area, they're gonna buy higher density from us. We're transferring those development rights from a piece that we're gonna keep open, giving them higher density in another location.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're paying for that.
Yeah.
They buy those rights from us.
Yeah.
Be interesting to look at.
And that's why under the state law, they're supposed to pay you what you pay, so it's not an upsell, it's not a way to generate cash, it's a way to just, in theory, preserve open space and break even. And there are not a lot of communities doing it. Most of the conservation easements in the state are actually just farmers who are giving it to the state for tax breaks. Because if they give development rights up, they get substantial tax breaks.
I guess the only downside is that, like, if you look at the Barker's property and you decide you guys don't wanna farm it anymore, and your grandkids don't wanna farm it anymore, that means that Tiffany has to buy hay balers and.
Yeah, the maintenance is the biggest part of it.
Yep.
It really is.
And so having a critical mass of property would make sense so that it's enough to keep even a hobby farmer or someone interested in running the ground so that the city doesn't have to. But there is always that eventuality that the city will take it over. And maybe it'll just be left as open fields and not farmed, but it would be something to.
It could be leased to a farmer.
Yeah.
I know there's quite a bit of property that, some areas up Cache Valley and Tree Mountain Way that farmers that don't farm anymore, they lease it off to younger farmers who can't afford to buy it, but they do all the watering and the harvesting and split the proceeds. You know, they pay a lease fee to the landowner, and so it's continued to be used for agriculture, and I imagine we could do the same thing. I'm sure there'd be a farmer somewhere that would be interested in the alfalfa that they could grow.
Plus it keeps it in Greenbelt and the tax break.
Yeah. I'd like to look at that, look into that. I don't know what everybody else feels. But I've got some spots in the city that I think that might be something for us
I'm
to.
not gonna voice an opinion on this one.
What's that?
I'm not voicing an opinion on this one.
Why not?
Because
Because he might be a
I'm on both sides.
potential
Well, no,
benefit.
I'm on the council side and I have family that owns land on that side.
Yeah.
So
It could be good for everybody though.
Besides maintenance.
As far as an opinion,
conflict of mind, yeah.
as far as the opinion is concerned, say, maybe it's not your Barker land over there, but
It's a good idea.
John Smith's,
Right. It's land,
He's
it's
over
land.
here.
It's a
Well,
good
I'm
idea.
thinking some of the open foothills that we have up here.
That's why I
A
asked
lot,
about the agriculture.
a lot of, yeah, I know, that's why, yes, I could hear it.
I know.
There's a lot of places that aren't just necessarily alfalfa fields,
Right.
that this kind of thing may preserve some great open space that is used for a lot of recreation and that could be very, very beneficial.
Canoes.
Yeah, well, there's about 12 property owners up in that area.
There is, but.
Knutson's and about 11 others.
the area where I'm from in Cache Valley, there's a lot of that being done. There's some fairly good sized pieces.
Yeah.
Just, north of Providence that, development rights have been purchased and it'll stay that way forever.
Yeah.
And the hardest part of that discussion is where you sell the density to, because that's going to be the hardest part, is picking winners and losers, because in the TDR Act you have to identify the transfer zone, which is where it's coming from, and the receiving zone, which is where the density is going to, and that's
I
the
think we ought to
problem.
have that conversation.
The state also has
Start
money
that
for that
process.
purpose as well.
Especially if it's tied to agriculture, they have programs that help support.
Where the rights here can be used in another municipality?
If it was identified as the receiving ground. But the state might have no interest loans or things that the city could borrow money, buy rights,
Buy the
and then
rights.
pay the state
Gotcha.
back as the money comes in.
I think there's even money on the state level that if somebody applies to the state to sell their development rights, there is a fund out there to do that.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the Barker family can approach the state and say, I want to sell my development rights. I don't know whether there's any sizes or things of that nature that would have to be, but the state does accumulate some money in that particular fund to do that.
Excuse me.
I want to change subject for just a second, since this is about talking about vision meeting and stuff. I'm still opposed to it, but let's talk gondola. Only because from what I understand, from what I've heard, I don't Facebook, as you know, what I've heard is that the developer has already been talking to somebody who has property in the county, that he can land the gondola still on this side. I don't know how true that is. Phil, you may know more about that or not, but what have you heard? For me personally, I'm still not in favor of it, but looking in the future, if they are actually gonna do that there, we need to take it into consideration. Even if it is in the county, we're still gonna have to deal with it. So let's, I just wanna know what.
Well, there's always, I mean, from day one, there's been the possibility that it can happen without us completely.
Correct.
Because of the amount of county land that's available. You know, the reality has been that the Forest Service could approve it, the county could approve it under their zoning, and it gets done without any input from us. But as you said, we end up bearing the headache.
We're gonna have to deal with it.
We've got to deal with it. We've got to deal with, you know, I'm sure county sewer would force us to allow their sewer to run through our system down to the collection, you know, down there on North, yeah, out there on Weaver. You know, we'd have the traffic. We'd have all those things without any say in density, what is and isn't put up there, commercial versus residential.
Who's paying for what?
Who's paying for what? We would have zero say. And we would also have a fairly hefty burden to bear financially with additional services, you know, plowing roads, police calls, you know, all those kinds of things, without any of the tax benefit, because we're out of the system.
So we could either participate and have the headaches, or we could not participate
and have the headaches. So, you know, and that's all speculative on the Forest Service approving and the county approving. But the reality is it could happen without us quite easily.
So, from what I've heard, again, I'm not Facebook and stuff, but I've heard of some parts, pieces from you, but also from other residents and stuff, that they're almost done with the Forest Service, that the Forest Service about
that. I have no clue where they are on that.
That's what I've heard. They've told people, the owners, what's their name?
James Coleman.
Yeah, that they've told people that the Forest Service is nearly complete. It could be a bunch of.
So they,
yes, you know,
the Forest Service is still doing their review of the plan, and then once they're done with that, they'll say this is the type of environmental analysis or environmental impact statement you have to provide to us. So that they're almost done with one of the steps, but they're not going to say yes, move forward, you have our blessing.
So I've had residents come to me and say that they have been told that they're going to start next year construction.
Well, that's been James's, I mean, pie in the sky dream forever to start.
Well, I mean, I don't know how feasible.
Spring of 2020.
If they had to do the very minimal environmental statement, it's 6 months. So he's not out of his timeline, but more than likely it'll be a much more lengthy environmental study that has to be done.
Well, I think, didn't Sean Harwood post something that said they're going to be doing another study that could take up to 3 years?
I didn't see that post.
Okay.
So let me just ask this, as a city council.
There's close to 100 acres up there that's all county.
Right. Well, as a city council, we need to think about this. We need to think, as a vision, and some of us won't be on council, some of us will be, possibly. And we know Blake will be for sure, you know, but other than that, the rest of us may not be here, but we still need to have something, at least for the next council, so they don't come in here and are completely blindsided, you know, not knowing what. I think we need to, as a council, we don't have to make any decisions right now, but we need to figure out how we're gonna deal with it. Let's think worst case scenario, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, take whatever comes. So let's prepare for the worst. What's the worst thing that can happen is that they force it on us, and we have to deal with it. That's what I see, and we don't get any benefit.
With no benefit, yeah.
So, what were you gonna say, Ryan?
I've sort of talked with John, not just about the gondola, but if my understanding, and I might be wrong, if anyone develops and ties into our utilities, aren't they annexed into our city?
Not under the current rules.
So if we
Not under the current rules?
So can we make that under our, can we change our rules?
A good example is all the homes on Fruitland, or a lot of the homes that are on Fruitland are in the county, but they use our city services.
Well, but from this time going, or from now going forward,
Not
anyone
grandfathered
that
in.
makes new connections, aren't they annexed in? So if
you
they were
annex
gonna
it,
build a
you have
gondola
to-
and tie into our sewer, that's a new connection.
So I think there might be some opportunities to put some things in place like that say you have to, if you're going to use our system, you have to contribute
Yeah, if you
in
have to
some
make,
way.
or like a new connection and not, cause yeah, I know
Yeah,
there's.
the best example of a conflict like this is the Walmart up in Brigham City. The Walmart is actually in Perry, but the parking lot's in Brigham City, and they have an interlocal agreement that shares the sales tax.
Oh,
So, because you can't have one without the other, and
No
so,
sewer without sewer.
so if
Yeah.
it came down to that, I think there's some things that could be put in place. Although they're kind of, I'm not sure the county wouldn't sue us, and I don't know how a court would come down, but I think there's some things we could do if the county was trying to force it down our throat to get some benefits, but we wouldn't get all the benefits. So, which is kind of.
Could you explore that, I mean, just so we as a city, we can, because, you know, we're talking, it could happen in 6 months, but it could happen in, Blake saying 3 years to study it, you know, we don't know, but let's say it takes 5 years. Everybody on this council, could be gone, and some of the city staff could be moved on too, you know, and so we need to, I think it'd be nice for us to be able to at least, like Ryan's talking, if they tie in, they need to do something, either annex or something, you know. And we don't have to have them grandfathered in, but from now forward, moving forward, because I think even with, I mean, I don't know if there's, because you mentioned police services and fire services and stuff like that, if we have those services that go up there, there needs to be some contribution. You know, if they talk about putting a restaurant, I've heard they talk about putting a restaurant up on the top of the hill, and if we end up having to evac people off of that mountain, you know, the residents of North Ogden don't want to pay to have that happen, you know, unless they're contributing, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of, so it'd be nice to have something.
Well, on a small scale now, that happens with county residents within our boundaries,
Correct.
with fire and police service anyway. I mean, it's not the sheriff's department that responds to that 911 call, it's North Ogden Police,
Correct.
even though they're not paying city taxes to cover that.
And we had talked about that, and that's part of the reason the
Yeah, but we're a
law
little bit
came out to where all these little pockets were annexed into the city, and we could have them annexed in.
And, you know, if that got shoved down our throats, that's a much bigger draw on our resources than, you know, the few county island homes that we have in our city. Something we have to consider.
Good discussion.
And it's only been like a half hour or something according to that clock.
We've actually gone backwards in time.
So,
Yeah, they did.
No, we've been here for
Started at 3 and it's 12:37.
9 hours.
Are we done
Been
yet?
really long, right?
9.5 hours.
Are there any other items that need to come forth in this group? As we
Well,
look down the road?
along, you know, the similar lines that Carl was, you know, we have possible development going up high above the cove. You know, and that coming in, and I think as a council, we have to be thinking about what do we want to see up there?
And
And
you're
what-
talking about what, they came in and talked about possibly doing a convenience store and stuff like
All
that.
kinds of stuff,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a good
And I
point,
think
Rita.
we need to be discussing that instead of just waiting for it to show up. I think we ought to be having those discussions, and part of that would be the discussion that we have in the vesting, if we're gonna vest our master plan. Some of that discussion of what do we want where, and are we willing to put some teeth behind it?
I think that's good, I think that's a good thought.
And have that, you know, that long-range conversation and discussion as to whether we do it through vesting or other mechanisms that may be available, that we look at that long-term vision and start making some decisions now that limit or better control where we end up in the future.
I think that's a good idea, I mean, because I thought a lot about that, and you know, I mean, if they're living all the way up past the cove, and the nearest gas station's down here at 7-Eleven or Maverick, that's quite a ways, and, you know, so having pockets of that, I think that's something we need to look at.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation we need to have.
That's for sure.
And the only other thing I've already talked about it is police radios. I know it's on the budget thing, but we really need to, I want that in the budget for sure, but then also, I think it's necessary, you talked about, all of the police officers, the cars, but also a few extra now, or right, or something like that, is that where you're thinking?
Well, we started last year with our new installs, putting 2 radios in those 2 new cars, so we've got 2 done and out in the field. And then whatever cars we get this year, they were gonna include new radios as well, the in-car radios. So above and beyond that is everything that's in service already that does not have a radio, which would be 15 radios.
So I think that's I was surprised when I found out they didn't have it. I just assumed they did, I honestly did, I just assumed they did, but I just think it's,
You know, 23 years ago, I can't tell you for sure if we had them in our cars. I don't think we've ever had radios in our cars since I've been here.
I know this much. Barney Fife had a radio in his car, so I don't know why we can't.
I definitely think for the safety of the officers, and that's becoming more important now than ever before, that definitely ought to be a priority, to make sure those radios are included in this year's budget so that our officers are out there with some kind of communication should they have a failure with what's on their shoulder.
You're working on that, Chief?
Yep.
Sweet.
Okay, I'm sure we've taken some minutes here, and so we'll summarize some of those kind of things after we get a chance to look at them.
Can I say one more thing? Just real quick.
No.
Did we talk about, I'm going to anyway, did we talk about Longman View Park?
Not in this meeting, but we have programmed for the restroom in the
Okay.
budget for this year.
Okay, good.
And that'll be taking care of the budget meetings that we have coming up. Today, we're just gonna talk about some priorities and some things that we need to get done to continue with the progress of the city. And the city's had good progress, and we wanna maintain that kind of progress, make sure that we're up to date on whether it be public works, whether it be public safety, recreation, all these different avenues. We wanna make sure that we're moving forward, as we have been.
Do we have certain things in place too, as far as small businesses or businesses coming in that, you know, that we don't want? That they can't come and say, we're coming in here because we don't have anything in place?
There's certain ones that we have that
I
aren't
do know
allowed.
we do
but
have
they-
some.
but
Do we
other
need to
than-
look
yeah.
at more?
We're
good.
we're actually pretty tight on most of those
Okay.
businesses that we don't want, and a lot of it's because of the state rules. So like tobacco, specialty tobacco shops or vape shops can't be within so many feet of a residential property or an agricultural property. And our commercial district is long and skinny, and almost every commercial property in the city is too close to residential or agricultural. So, you know, there's things like that we don't have a big risk of coming. There's some that we have to allow, but we've never had anyone apply for. adult businesses. Those are allowed in our manufacturing zone, but it's not a large zone, and we've never had anyone apply for one of those uses. Because they're not on the public, they're not on Washington Boulevard, so usually those folks like to be on high traffic corridors, and we don't allow them on our high traffic corridors.
Okay.
And thinking of business as well, and I mentioned earlier that we had people who were looking at sit-down restaurant, shopping center, maybe a big box store, small businesses, as we just mentioned. And we'll be meeting with the Economic Development Committee to continue to pursue those kind of things. We're looking at John maybe attending the business conference in Las Vegas to see if we can attract more business within our community and stay within the commercial zones that we've established. We also need to update the master plan this year. So that's another project that needs to be completed.
That's for moderate income housing. We have to do it every 2 years. So typically you update your general plan or master plan every 6 years completely. And we now have to do it every 2 years, at least minor amendments. So.
Okay, this has been a good session. Thank you for all your input. And we want to continue the dialogue and think about these things and maybe hold another meeting in the future to finalize on some of these things as we look at them. Cheryl, you mentioned you had a comment.
I already did say good, thank you.
You covered that,
Mhm.
okay. Any other comments from council?
I just a couple of quick things. As you mentioned last week, Ryan Kudis, who's was the director of the mosquito abatement district, has resigned. He resigned actually last week. They put out on the application by the end of this week, we're supposed to have applications, and next week we're going to be going through them and then interviewing for a new mosquito abatement district director. We've appointed an intern, Keith. I can't remember Keith's last name off the top of my head, but he is the director now currently. He's been there, the #1 guy anyway. I think I hope he applies for the job. I think he'd be a good guy there. And then also Huntsville, I don't know if anybody's seen that there's a write-up in, I can't remember the paper, about their ice skating rink that they have in Huntsville. It's like an acre. And they're actually now renting skates over there. It's right at their Huntsville Park. They've put water on there, and I guess it's been a huge hit. So I don't know if anybody's been over there. I'm not an ice skater. I'm an ice
lived
faller.
there for 20 years, and they did it every year.
It's pretty awesome. And they had a big write-up on it. It was pretty awesome. So I just
Saw some hockey players over there recently.
let people know about it because it's pretty cool.
It
From
is
what I
really
read, I
cool.
haven't been over there, and I don't ice skate. So
They just let it naturally freeze, or do they
yeah,
have to?
they naturally freeze it, and it's huge. They could be playing hockey on one end and just having fun ice skating on the other end.
No, it's all volunteer.
Yeah, it's all volunteer, and they are renting skates now, where you take your own skates. But it's pretty
Council
fancy.
activity.
And you skate right over
Go
to
play a little
the
hockey.
Shooting Star and get one of their famous hamburgers.
I don't ice skate.
It's a burger with a hot
I
dog.
can't even ice stand. Well, I can't with crampons on.
I passed that stage.
In my ice
Oh,
stands, I
skate
can
or
do
burger and
that.
hot dogs.
Burger and hot dogs, okay.
So, that's all I got.
Okay. Cheryl, anything else? Ryan? Blake? Phil?
No.
John?
Nope.
Annette? Tiffany? Chief?
No.
Dave? Evan? Okay, we'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We've had that.
It was on the other agenda, I think, though. It was on the other agenda.
Oh, I think,
It's not.
I don't know,
It's on this one.
so it's on the public agenda, Mayor, so we could,
Oh, it is.
It is.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't on here.
Mine's short. So we entertain any public comment.
Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. I just wanted to let you guys know I really appreciate the opportunity to come and listen to this, and I just wanted to share some of my thoughts very quickly with you. I honestly would like to see the police department joined onto this building. I would like to see it be one big building. It makes it convenient for everybody, and it makes it easier for everybody, and I think the police department needs to have the best that they can have. And then my other thought is we talked about entertaining the citizens, and we do a lot for those citizens. I would kind of like to see Cherry Days enhanced even more. I think it would be really cool if we really started looking at enhancing Cherry Days even more than the way it is right now. Maybe some of those old-time Cherry Days activities could come back, and just enhance what we've got. I think a farmer's market would be great, but I know they are hard to do. It takes a lot of volunteers, a lot of work in getting them done, but hey, it doesn't hurt to maybe try on those. Also, just to tell you on the gondola, they are in discussions with a gentleman up there, and I can give you his name later. But I do know, I have a friend who's an environmental engineer who has talked to the Forest Service in depth about this, and he has said the phase they're in right now is purely, as was said, to get an idea of what kind of additional study they need to do. One of the things that they've asked for is if citizens are aware of anything up there that, maybe they feel would be endangered by having, whether it's a plant, a rock formation. And this person who actually talked to them knows there's some rock formations up there that could be seriously damaged up at the top end of cold water and stuff like that. So there's a good possibility that the environmental study that they will be asked to do could take anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So while 2020 was James Coleman's goal to get things started, it's not going to happen as fast as he thinks it is. The Forest Service has really... they've said on this one they do have some major concerns just because of where it's placed within a residential area and because of some of the additional water issues that he's asked for additional tanks. Well, he calls them tanks, they're big ponds, and they're millions of gallons of water. And they're wondering how that will affect just the water that comes down here into Ogden, whether it would, North Ogden, whether it would affect us that way. So there are a lot more things than people realize that are going on. But just so you know, yes, they are in talks with somebody who is willing to sell his land. So I just wanted to say that. And then I would like to see some fun small businesses come in here. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. I think someone needs to go down and talk to Bennions. Ladies have asked for a little craft store here, and I think that would be right next to Ace, would be a really good thing. Dad can go in shopping for his tools, and Mom can go in shopping for a glue and a felt. So that was just something, but thank you very much for letting us be here and for the things that have been brought up. I think they're very pertinent things that need to be, and I like the fact that you've prioritized, and I think the police department should most probably be number one on our list. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Quick, a couple notes. Kevin Burns, 795 East, 1925 North. Very encouraging planning meeting. Thank you very much. It's great to hear that bouncing around, and you guys obviously have a lot on your plate. 30 years ago this year, I started to work for the North Ogden City Police Department in that building right across the grass. It's time to be replaced. It needs a replacement. It was old then.
Does it say Kevin is here?
It's no. I can assure you, Polo had that removed. But it would be really nice to have everything in one complex, like you've discussed. I was also around back when Ogden City built their new public safety building, and I was part of the Metro SWAT team at that time. So spent a lot of time working in there and around that, and you may not know that they had to relocate their police department to an armory up on Jackson Avenue during that time. It was very uncomfortable, and it didn't work well, but it was worth the suffering to get into the very complex building that law enforcement needs to be in. And if the way our city is growing and the things that are taking place in our business district and our residentials, our police need to be taken care of. Our fire department's they're taken care of. They have their substation up in Pleasant View. That's real important for them to be able to respond to the things they need to do. Our law enforcement needs to be taken care of. And that really is part of an economic development piece, trying to draw business into who wants to come here and what kind of safety we have. So I'm going to add the word on the radios. Still using the converticomms? Is that what we're kind of using something
We were,
similar to that, or straight handhelds?
right now we're just straight handed.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. So thank you for looking to take care of that and fix that for those guys. That's a huge deal. You have a guy jump out of it, trying to work a handheld radio and something going on it's miserable. I remember the one radio, and I remember going to the county and having 2 radios, and I thought that was a huge improvement. So throw that in. The water discussion we have about the water tank, couple that with the discussion about the Nordic Valley expansion, and really emphasizes how important it is to manage our water. So thank you very much. Huge deal. We talked a lot of good things about roads. 2100 North needs some attention. Just cut down the tree that's growing next to the street on about 700 East and we'll be fine. But it's growing into the street. And just, hey, thank you very much. Very encouraging to see what y'all are doing, and appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been seconded by Councilman Swanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Is this you? Nobody opposed. Thank you.
We got council meeting.